Welcome to Gwinnett County Public Library. My name is Gina Duvernay, Adult Services Manager. Thank you for joining us for today's talk. Today, we're honored to be joined by author Ravynn Stringfield, and moderating today's talk is also a member of the Gwinnett County Public Library, Gina Farewell, and she works with our Collection Development Department. So Ravynn K. Stringfield is a writer and professor originally from Suffolk, Virginia. Her creative nonfiction has appeared in publications such as Shonda Land, Zora, and Catapult magazine. Love Requires Chocolate is her debut novel. She can be found haunting coffee shops in search of the perfect hazelnut latte, knee-deep in art supplies, or curled up with her dog, Guinness, telling him about
Genghis.
Inga's telling him about her Lois Lane obsession. Welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for being here, and we're looking forward to this talk. So I'll turn it over to you, Gina.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so hi, Raven. How are you doing this morning
Hi,
or
I'm
this
good.
afternoon?
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. I'm really excited to chat with y'all today. So just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, listening, and thank you for being here for this conversation.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about your debut novel, Love Requires
Yes.
Chocolate. Okay, so for the audience members that may not have finished the whole book yet, or they're just getting started, they just found out about this morning. What is this book
Yeah.
about?
So, Love Requires Chocolate is a young adult contemporary romance that follows Whitney Curry's adventures abroad for a semester study abroad. She is a type A theater nerd and she's got these grand plans about how she's going to spend her time in Paris. She wants to create this really beautifully researched one woman show about Josephine Baker. And in pursuit of all of these plans that she's got, her research plans, she does not anticipate accidentally kind of falling for her very grumpy French tutor. And so the rest of the book is how they kind of get that together.
Okay. So in the book, we see a transformation in Whitney,
Mhm.
where she goes from American as foreigner
Yeah.
to American as almost native, not quite, but
Yeah.
almost there. Can you talk to us about that journey throughout the book?
Yeah. So Whitney, I think the big thing about Whitney is that she begins the book very much with a very romantic idea of what it is to be Parisian, a very romantic idea of Paris. It's very rose-colored glasses. She's very artistic and romantic as a person. I think she would probably say less about the romance part of it and more about I love Paris because I am an artist, and artists are supposed to love Paris without having ever actually been there. And so I think what my favorite part of the journey for Whitney is her understanding that it's Paris is not an idea, it's a place where people live and people don't, it's not just a tourist trap. Like folks do live in the apartments above the shops. You know what I mean? Like people do their everyday life in Paris. And so it was important for me to, showcase that for Whitney, that a place, I think Thierry says it best, the love interest, Paris can be, a haven without being perfect, right? Like it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but it does have to be real. And you have to kind of deal with the reality of it. And because she is so head in the clouds, she's so she's kind of like a walking daydream in some ways. And I love that there are opportunities for her to get really grounded and to still love this city, and love it the way that someone who lives in it loves it, as opposed to someone who is just kind of, somebody who picks up the little Paris icons when you're like shopping or whatever. She's somebody who really has internalized what it means to be of a place.
Okay. So about you as an author. what
Yeah.
is your writing process like? So are
Ooh.
you a plotter or a pantser?
Um, I I kind of bounce between the two, I think. It really kind of depends on what the project is and um how how much I understand the story to start out with. Because I think sometimes the story just makes sense to me, like the plot points make sense, and so then I will be a plotter, right? Like I will get all the beats down. I do outline regardless, but sometimes it's just easier, and sometimes I start with that, and then sometimes with a project I kind of start with um the character and the like feeling that I have and do some like voice pages to see like where we're supposed to be uncovering the story. So like with Love Requires Chocolate, which was not the same as some of my other projects, I didn't have to do like so much voice work at the beginning because I knew exactly who Whitney was. Like I knew exactly what kind of person she was immediately. And so I didn't have to do so much finding her. I didn't have to kind of excavate her. So I could go straight into like, okay, well, these are the beats. This is how this happens. Because I think most writers would tell you kind of figuring out that balance is a nice interplay between thinking through character and thinking through the plot points because you simply aren't going to know what the plot points are unless you know how your character is going to react to them, right? Because that is also what drives the plot. So because I did know who Whitney was pretty early on, I was able to kind of say, oh, she would react in this way in this situation, which would lead us to this, which would lead us to that. However, it's really not so neat all the time. I've been working on a project for like a couple of years now that like I only just started outlining and I've got probably like 20,000 words in a document that's it's mess. It's absolutely mess. It's for sure mess, but it just kind of depends on the project.
Okay, I have a side question based on your
Okay.
answer just now.
Okay.
What is a voice page? I've actually never heard of that term.
I don't actually know if this is a real like the real term for it, but sometimes I write I just write things from the perspective of the character, even if it's stuff that may not end up in the book, just so that I kind of have a sense of like what the internal dialogue of a character is and kind of like like their kind of stream of consciousness, just to kind of like settle in, you know, to who they are a little bit. Those pages are not always necessary. They are necessary when I don't have a great like grasp on who the character is and I need to kind of like figure it out because I will write the few pages and then I'll go back and I'll be like I'll look at it and I'm trying to figure out okay, if this is basically the kind of person that I'm thinking they are, they wouldn't say that. They would say it like this or they would react in this way. You know, so there's like so for example, I had to do some pages like that for Cherry the love interest because I wasn't entirely sure like who he was at first. It took a few passes through the book before I was like, okay, I know how he's reacting in every given situation. So it just it's part of the discovery process of novel writing for me. Again, I'm not actually sure if that's like a real term or you know, I know people do it. I think we just call it different things, but yeah, that's part of my process.
It sounds really useful. Okay, so this reads like a YA enemies to lover romance.
Mhm.
Why this trope or genre or interest level for your first book?
Yeah. So I have always really loved young adult to like one part of the question. Um, I did go through a phase where I, you know, trying to be more adult than I actually was, like was very into classics and was telling myself that I didn't need to read young adult because, you know, whatever. I did go through that kind of like breakup phase where I thought I was too cool for it. And then at some point in college, I was like, wait, hold on, no, no, no. I love this. Like I genuinely love young adult novels. And I love it because you know, I think there's something really special about getting to write stories for people who are discovering themselves and the world at the same time. And I think all of us, even as adults, go through lots of coming of ages, but we're much more forgiving of young people when they are figuring it out for the first time. Or, I think a lot of us are tend to be more forgiving of young people when they are, because they're people that have just lived in the world a little less than us, right? So they don't know these things. And so I find a lot of delight in writing first experiences of things, right? Like the first time you've experienced something for any reason, because it is so emotionally charged. And like I just really love how deep in your emotions you can get, because I think there's a lot of first loves in Love Requires Chocolate for Whitney that have nothing to do with the love interest, right? Like she basically starts crying the first time she's, driving around the city, in the city that she's loved for so long, because she's overwhelmed, she's overcome. Like this is a dream come true for her. She's made a dream that she's had for herself for, we don't really know how long, but for a long portion of her life, her short life, made it come true already, and she's just overcome by that. So those sorts of moments really drive me to continue to write YA. Romance, again, I've always really loved YA romances for many of the same reasons. And I would say enemies to lovers, I I think lovers is also really strong. For like, I think it's the best trope that describes it. And also I do think that it's more like they just kind of get off on the wrong foot. And that for them, because I think I love those tropes, because you have to confront the fact that you thought you understood someone, or you thought you had a good idea of who someone was, and now you have to go back and like retroactively fix what you thought, right? And not only do you have to grapple with the fact that I was wrong about this person, which can be difficult, right? Like I was wrong, I had the wrong idea about this person, but now I also have to make space for a feeling I just did not think that I had, right? Like now it's not just, I was wrong, but now I have to make space. And so that's something that was really, I loved for Whitney and Cherry. And then I think also enemies to lovers is really good for Whitney. Um, I would say, because I say this often, but she needed a love interest that was not going to just like fall over their feet for her. She needed someone who was um had interests outside of her, was clearly captivated by her, but like Cherry is like, you don't I'm not going to roll out a red carpet for you just because, right? Like you think everyone should do that, and like I'm not going to. And it's kind of like a pouty, like, well, why not, sort of energy for for Whitney in response. But I like that dynamic. I like that there's some work there, some going back over work. You have to go back. You have to kind of restructure things. And I think it's good for someone like Whitney who thinks she knows everything. So,
Okay. So let's see. What part of the book was most fun to write? And can you read us that passage, maybe?
sure. Okay. So, well, if I do it, because it's later in the book, so much spoil, well, it is kind of a spoiler, but it's a romance. I think we know how the genre works. um but I will say my favorite passage to write was a passage that almost did not make it into the final book. So it is late in the game when Whitney and Thierry have like decided that they are something. We don't really know yet, but they are something. And Whitney runs into her grandmother. And so the context for this is that the person that Whitney, I think, loves most in the entire world is her grandmother. Like she loves her mom. She loves her grandma. Her grandma really facilitates a lot of her love of art and her love of Paris. And also her just kind of like freewheeling independent spirit. And so I knew immediately, like when I was writing this book, that I wanted a scene where like Nana Curry just showed up. And I got a lot of pushback for that. A lot of folks were telling me that it was kind of unrealistic that her grandmother would just be, randomly traveling through Europe or wouldn't tell her or whatever. And I had to do a lot with that because it didn't match my worldview. So my grandmother and then the elder women that I knew growing up, maybe they weren't, just like jet setting off to Paris, but they very, very much were like, I'm gonna do whatever I want whenever I want to do it, and I don't have to ask you. I don't have to, like I don't have to, do any of that kind of thing. So I grew up with women who, like my dad's mom, we would show up at her house and she would be in an entirely different state. And, we'd be like, why didn't you tell anyone? She was like, I didn't have to. I'm grown. Ah, okay. All right. Like, so, I grew up with people who, I grew up with women who were really fiercely independent and like, had a lot of agency in that way. Um, and so when folks were trying to tell me that it was unrealistic that Nana would just show up in Paris, I was like, this is actually very realistic to me. Um, but I will, let's see. I will, in fact, read you a little bit of that section. It's a kind of long section, but so I'll start here on page 196 in case anyone is following along. And then I will just, I guess, flag me if I'm going too long. Um, Abandoning my bookstore browsing plan, even though we've already made it to Shakespeare and Company, the deep green sign visible in my periphery. I can see folks milling around, including a woman sitting outside the cafe next door who reminds me of my Nana. Whitney? The woman who reminded me of Nana rises from her little table, extending to her full height of almost 6 feet, and I spring away from Thierry, putting a good foot of space between the two of us, because this woman, draped in an earth tone shawl and gold statement earrings, is without a doubt my grandmother, Diana Curry. Nana, I say, trying to plaster a smile on my face as I walk over to her and her coffee companion. I hear Thierry murmur, Nana, but I keep going until I reach them. I hug Nana hard, drinking in her natural spicy scent mixed with the woodsy perfume she's been wearing my whole life, then kiss both cheeks of the other woman, who is about Nana's age but very different in her appearance. This woman is small and has sharp features with a tiny, well-groomed afro, cat's eye glasses, and a floral scarf tied around her neck over her black cashmere sweater. I don't have time to wonder who she is because my grandmother is demanding all of my attention at the moment. Nana is tall and full-figured. Her light brown roller set hair cascades and waves around her face, which is enhanced with understated but elegant makeup, as if she is about to walk onto a stage at any minute. What are you doing here? I asked, both delighted to see my Nana and somehow unsurprised to run across her spending a lazy afternoon in Paris, thousands of miles from home. Surely you don't think you're the only Curry allowed to gallivant across Europe? Nana asked with a smile and a raised eyebrow. What she means is, why do you think I have to ask anyone for permission to do what I want, little girl? She doesn't say it, but her eyes do. Of course not, Nana, I replied, trying to course correct. I only meant, did you travel here by yourself? Yes, darling, Nana replies as if I've just asked the silliest question in the world. I find traveling in groups exhausting. This is much more enjoyable. And if you would answer that little phone of yours, you would know I'm in town. I called you a couple of hours ago. But I see now that you may have been preoccupied. She appraises Thierry for a moment, and I feel my cheeks heat before she turns her attention back to me. If you must know, I'm only in Paris to pick up Thea here. She gestures grandly to the woman sitting at the table, eyeing us over her coffee. On our way to Berlin. Berlin? I repeat blankly. Nana, did you tell anyone, namely Mom, that you were off on a transatlantic jaunt? My grandmother waves the question away with both hands, which are adorned with all manner of gold bangles, and huffs in exasperation. Thierry, who has sidled up beside me now that he's assessed the situation, stifles a laugh. Well, I've told you. Yes, but when I talked to you last, you only said you were thinking about coming to Europe, not that you were coming to Europe. And if you only called me a couple of hours ago, Mom is going to be worried. I can feel a crease forming between my eyebrows, and I rub it off as if to prevent it from becoming permanent. Whitney, my dear, your mother hasn't got as much imagination as we do, so I doubt she would have approved of my plan, which is why I didn't tell her. Nana shakes her head. She's just the most lovable little thing on the planet, but her idea of adventure is running off and getting married to a businessman right out of undergraduate. She speaks with a bit of apology in her voice. Nothing against your father, of course. Of course, he's a lovely man. I only hoped Yvette would wander a bit before settling down, and we'd see how that turned out. I grimace remembering the divorce, but then fight back a chuckle. Typical Nana. Now, is your program going well? I presume you were hard at work on your performance. Yes, I am, Nana. I give her a quick summary of where I am now, with a full script and musical numbers that tell a story, but leave out the fact that something just isn't clicking. Then I chance a glance at Thierry. I've heard Nana's tirade about my mother's desire to be settled more times than I care to count, but I imagine Thierry might be somewhat taken aback. He gives Nana an expression of reserved interest, as if he wants to know more but is not keen to get too close. When my gaze falls back on Nana, she is looking at me expectantly. She clearly hasn't missed my glance at Thierry or our intimate moment just a few minutes ago. There's no playing this off, not with Diana Curry. Nana, I say, standing up straighter, this is Thierry Magnon. He's my tutor. Thierry nods stiffly. Bonjour, madame. Nana looks at him up and down, then turns to me with disbelief written clear as day all over her face. Okay, fine, boyfriend. Thierry's my boyfriend. I blurt out, feeling heat blossom on my cheeks as I stare down at the ground, suddenly fascinated with some pebbles to avoid both Nana's and Thierry's gazes. He and I have not discussed our relationship status yet, but it feels right to say. Even so, I can sense all my internal organs melting from stress and embarrassment because what if I've been wrong about this in front of my grandmother of all people? Finally, I peek at Thierry, who seems to have had life blown into him at my confession. He steps forward and kisses my Nana on both cheeks, as well as her friend Thea, then launches into a quick but passionate speech to Nana in French about how nice it's been to get to know her granddaughter. His dark eyes have lit up, and I can see his dimples. I don't know whether my tutoring lessons are finally paying off, or if I'm just used to the lilt of Thierry's words in both French and English, or if I'm understanding the emotion behind them, but nothing has sounded so clear to me since I landed at Charles de Gaulle in September. Whatever the case, I am astonished. Oh, no, dear, that's kind, but we won't have time, I hear Nana saying as I check in on the conversation. Having zoned out, I try to backtrack to figure out what we're talking about. But Nana used to see some of her old friends for dinner, but that's such a sweet offer. My eyes widen. Did this boy just offer to have a meal with my grandmother, who he just met? Nana's electric brown butter eyes land back on me, and I feel myself straighten. Whitney, you have excellent taste in young men. I exhale a little. I glance at Thierry, who gives me a tiny wink, and I smirk. Frankly, I was worried you'd take after your mother. So serious all the time. Nana continues, straightening her shawl, then centering the gold necklace so that the clasp spins to the back of her neck. I roll my eyes. Nana likes to pick at Mom, but it comes from a place of love. I know you love things to be orderly, but it's reassuring that you can be flexible when the moment calls for it. Young man, she says, turning to Thierry, who perks up, you will do right by my granddaughter, or you can rest assured I know people who will find you. Thierry's eyes widen. I quickly step in. Nana, I'm sure you didn't mean to threaten Thierry, I warn. Of course not, Nana says, waving me away again. I am merely being emphatic.
Nana showing up was actually one of my favorite moments of the book.
You know what? Like across the board, it has been, especially amongst Black women and girl readers, has been everyone's favorite part. like universally, I will say. And it was one of my favorites to write because I, again, like just like Whitney, I knew what kind of person Nana was. It's, the voice to me, maybe not stature, but like the voice to me gave like Felicia Rashad. And then like stature wise, maybe like a Lynn Whitfield, kind of like a mixture of the two of them. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that part with us.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so Whitney has a deep love for Josephine Baker.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in the novel, you also mention other expats that have left
Hmm.
America and moved to France. How was
Hmm.
this history important to the novel?
Yeah, it's important to the novel, particularly because Whitney is an artist, right? I think there is that I'm a Black American artist. I have this curiosity about what it would mean to be in another place because I am an artist. And she understands herself in a legacy. Like she understands that she did not get to just be, who she is without everyone that comes before her. And so I think what's really beautiful about Whitney is that she is an artist in conversation, an artist in history. Um, and so that was really important to me also because um, I feel like we talk about it much less. Um, I think there is a way because of Black Americans' history we tend to only think about um, our relationship to America. Not always, but it's kind of like we're but I think it's also like it makes sense. It makes sense given everything that we've been through that our primary interest or our primary focus is how Blackness works in America. But I think what is so beautiful about studying artists in particular, and also activists, lots of different folks, is that you get to kind of understand your Blackness in a global perspective or like in a global sort of way. And so that's, I think, why it was really, really important that Whitney was, she was trying to understand herself through people who had been through similar experiences as her abroad, right? Like she is not alone. I think we don't get a lot of this. That her kind of vulnerabilities don't I don't think take center stage. We kind of get bits of it, but I do imagine with a personality as kind of large as Whitney's is, and how she kind of fumbles finding the right people and kind of fumbles in initial conversations with folks and initial interactions, that she might struggle a little bit to find the people that she's connected with. She knows her Nana loves her. She knows her mom loves her, and everyone else kind of is. It's a little. There's a little friction, and so I imagine she's not unaware of that. She's not unaware of the fact that she is a little different than everyone else. But she's taken a lot of solace in knowing that maybe it's not that I'm different. Maybe it's just that I'm an artist and I see the world in this particular way. And so if that's true, there are other people who have probably felt the way that I did, and I can look to them for some answers. And so that's part of why she's also like so obsessed with Josephine Baker, because Josephine Baker probably felt very similar to how she felt. And she found a world for herself. She built a world for herself in France. So,
Okay. Uh, how did you celebrate when this book was published?
oh yeah, I funnily enough, I had a wild publication day. I did not actually do anything special. A family member we ended up in the ER for a family member, so I did not get to like actually. Yeah, it was it's like a wild sort of day, but the rest of the week was really fun. And so I think the thing that I really, really loved, the celebration that meant a lot to me, was I had a hometown book signing. Now, I am from Suffolk, Virginia, which is it's a hard place to describe. It's not quite rural. It's very suburban. But also but you would, when I was in high school, if you could get caught behind like a tractor and you would be late to school. So, it wasn't quite rural, but it's also not very urban either. And so like as a contextual piece, like I remember when we got our first Starbucks, I was like late in high school because we had somewhere to hang out that wasn't Chick-fil-A, right? Like so it's definitely not a big place by any means or any stretch of the imagination. And so, as you might imagine, we don't have a bookstore, we don't have a Barnes Noble, we don't have like an indie store. But everyone that I loved and everyone that supported me was in this area or an even more sort of rural area. And so I was like, I really want my old teachers, my sorority sisters, folks from my mom's church. I want from mom and dad's church. Like, I want people to have, an opportunity to come and like get the book and we celebrate together because these are the people that made me, who made it possible for me to be where I am. And so, I called a local coffee shop and asked if I could just, if I could come and sell some books, hang out for like 2 hours. And they said yes. And we got that set up and people were really brilliant. My neighbor, she makes like, I guess like balloon effects or whatever for parties and things like that. So she made me this really beautiful like balloon arch and like a backdrop or whatever to set it up so that I could have like a special backdrop for my signing. And lots and lots of people came out. Lots of people came out. People I wasn't expecting, people I hadn't seen in like maybe a decade and a half, maybe longer. Like I have a really beautiful picture. Two people in particular. My elementary school librarian came. And I was beside myself. Because she is one of the people I would definitely attribute my love of books to, because I worked in the library as a kid. So my mom was an elementary school teacher and I needed something to do before and after school. And so I would stay out of her hair. So I would go and I would, shelve books and, check books back in for the librarian. And as a, a trade-off, I could take out as many books. I didn't have a limit for how many books I could take out if I wanted to. So I always got the first books, whatever came in. I was the first person that got, the books for Miss Courtney. And so I hadn't seen her probably since because she retired when I was in middle school. So I probably hadn't seen her in a good, probably good 2 decades. But I managed to get the info to her and she came. And that's probably one of my like most prized moments. The picture is so lovely. I should frame it. It's really beautiful. But yeah, I think that was a few days after it came out, but I think that was the perfect celebration for the book. Yeah.
It sounds lovely.
Yeah. It was great. It was great.
So, okay, so Thierry has an interesting viewpoint on Whitney's stay in Paris. He
Mhm.
commented that Whitney treated Paris as though she was a tourist.
Mhm.
But Paris, no matter how long she stayed, it was her home. Can you
Mhm.
talk to us about that detail? So, like, for example, what is the concept of home in that situation?
I think really what Terry wants her to understand is that like you're not just passing through. You're here long enough for you to have to be a regular somewhere, to make friends and to like you have a path that you walk every day to school, or you have a path that you walk every day to get your lunch. And you don't have time to really do that if you're there for a week, 2 weeks, or something like that. But she's there for like a few months, which is long enough to settle in somewhere. It's long enough to you won't be necessarily a native, but you can't act like you're gonna pick up and take your suitcase the next day. So for him, I think part of it is also Thierry wants her to stop treating Paris as such a romantic, idyllic place. That's mostly, I think, where that stems from, right? Is that he wants her to like be realistic, be like kind of like I feel him as him in his mind being like, can you be serious, like just for once, like be serious. At the beginning of the text when she's talking about all the things that she wants to do, and like none of them include just kind of like normal living things, so I think also that comes from um some of that is his view as someone who's lived in a tourist trap his whole life. Um, it's like you still like even if this is a place that is very much in transit, even if this is a place that is very transitory for a lot of people, it's home for him. And so I could imagine him being very annoyed that this person is treat like you are here for a decent amount of time and you're treating it as if it's transitory, right? Like you're already treating it as if like you're treating it as if you're only doing things so that when you get back to wherever you're going, you have stories to tell. Like you're just kind of collecting things to give to people back where you came from instead of just like living where you are right now. And so he doesn't like that.
I think he does a really good job of portraying that he doesn't like that based on some of the places he took her. Okay, so you did mention a new book coming out. Did you want to tell our audience
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, so my second novel, Love in 280 Characters or Less, is going to be out on April 15th, so exactly 60 days from now. I'm very, very excited. It's not quite as like fluffy and swoony as Love Requires Chocolate is, but this one follows Sydney Sierra Warren. She is a Black girl going through her first semester at a predominantly white institution or a predominantly white college in Virginia. And so it's a digital epistolary. She talks about her experiences through text messages, tweets, emails, newsreels, and blog posts. Like that's kind of her big thing. It's a social media book. It's in totally told like that. I'm kind of old, and so the only real frame of reference that I have for a book that I know operated like this was Lauren Miracle's Internet Girls book. So when I was growing up, Lauren Miracle had this like trilogy of books that were told as if they were written in AOL Instant Messenger, like with the slang and everything. And I was obsessed with them. And so I, was like, I want kind of like an Internet Girls book for like this generation because we've come so far in the like 15 or 20. I don't remember how long it's been since Lauren Miracle wrote those books, but it's been a minute since those came out. So I wanted a kind of like new take on what it means to be of the internet age and to like come of age on the internet, which is a very I know it's everyone's got their opinions and they've got strong opinions about it. And so I wanted to just kind of wade through some of those questions a little bit, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so that is why it is told entirely like that. But there is romance. There is lots of romance, but it is very much a digital coming of age story, is what I will say.
Okay. All right, so I just have two more questions because I think our
Okay.
audience is very eager to have their questions
Oh,
answered.
yay. Okay.
So Whitney is a girl who likes her lists.
Mhm.
In the beginning of the novel, her ambassador, Monsieur Guillaume Polignac,
Mhm.
encourages her to go off script to explore
Mhm.
Paris without lists. And he says, you will discover more if you wander. What
Mhm.
more did Whitney discover throughout the book?
Ooh, what more did we need to discover throughout the book? I think the moments where she kind of like unexpectedly falls into step and she like lets herself have those home moments, right? where she like makes relationships with people who aren't even necessarily in her school or like her classmates, right? Like she has this really sweet relationship with sort of like the groundskeeper Henri, where she like will bring him coffee and stuff like that. Like those moments, the relationship that she has with Mathilde, who her sister does her hair, like those moments where she kind of just like stumbles into like a world outside of, because I feel like it's very easy in a situation like that for her to just stay in her school bubble and like, and that's not, or even that, like even though she's there, being in that school bubble is not actually like really experiencing the city, because it's a contained environment in a lot of ways. And so the moments where she gets to kind of really just meet people who are working and living in Paris and not like students who are also on study abroad, I think those are the really good moments. I even think, the moments where she gets to be in Parisian like apartments that, like anywhere that she is outside of school. So I love the Thanksgiving scene, that her like Thanksgiving that she makes up, because she just gets to be in a French home, chilling with French people, like doing dinner with them. And even just the moments where she's kind of falling into the music, like the music even is a little bit different than what she's kind of used to. And so I think those are the moments that she finds, right? Is that she can find these little, I think she expects everything to be fireworks. I think she expects everything to be like everything that's worth remembering to be exciting. And I think actually the things that she remembers are going to be the really, really small things. Like she's probably going to remember getting her hair braided. Like when she goes to Mathilde's sister's, her sister to get her hair done. Um, those really small things. So,
Okay. Okay, so this is my last question.
okay.
If you were trying to convince a YA reader to read this book, what would you tell them about it?
Mm. I feel like Paris, theater nerd, will like theater kid will do a lot for folks. But I also think what I would also say to a reader is, if you are the type of person who is um you feel like you're a lot and you're not sure if there will ever be space for you, this is definitely a book for you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ravynn. Those are all of my questions. So I will let
Yay.
Gina come back on.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Gina, for asking those great questions. And yeah, theater nerds, but I think that this was just like the perfect treat for Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and
I
it's
forgot.
set
Yeah.
in Paris. I mean, it doesn't get more lovely than that. Um, we have we have a question. Speaking of Paris, one of the attendees asked, "Do you share the love of Paris with Whitney? And if so, what aspects of Paris did you really want to include? Do you have any favorite locations that you felt you needed to add?"
Yeah. So I do actually share Whitney's love of Paris. I was a French major, fun fact. So I in college, I was very serious about it. I was a French major. We had a living and learning environment called the French House, where you could go. You basically would pledge to only speak French in common areas. Like you could speak English in your room, but like if you were in the house, you had to speak French. You had dinners that you had to go to Monday through Thursday, and you traditionally spoke French at the dinners, things like that. Um, I studied abroad twice. Like it was, I was very about it. So I do share Whitney's love of Paris, and um things that I wanted to make sure that we saw. Um Honestly, like I wanted to, I think there was a moment where I was like, I don't want her to be doing all of the kind of like stereotypical food. I will say I want her to eat a French croissant for the first time, because I genuinely do think that eating a French croissant is life changing. Like I actually do. Like compared to what we have in America, like every reaction that she has to eating that croissant for the first time is absolutely it's warranted, right? So that some of that, but I think also just the some of the stuff that she does like on the side, like she gets really obsessed with the kebab cart, some of the food that's like not necessarily like the restaurant, like, you know, hoity-toity French food that you think. There's like a lot of great just sort of street food. Like there's a lot of great just like, I mean, honestly, French people will give you a sandwich with like fresh bread, butter, like a little bit of like ham or prosciutto or something and like arugula, and it's the best sandwich you've ever had in your entire life. And so I wanted some of that where the food, like some of the food is just that's kind of what I wanted. I didn't do as much of that as I wanted to, but I also think that they're just like um there's also some moments sort of closer to the beginning where she's walking through Montmartre. I do love Sacre-Cœur. I think it is that is actually one of the, I think, appropriately rated tourist traps, because it is so pretty, like once you get up there. So I was excited to share that. But I think that I will say the parts of Paris that I was really most excited about was getting to talk about Black historical figures who had also kind of expatriated to Paris. So that I think was really the parts that I was really, 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 really excited about.
Very cool. I'm thinking we need to hear that part about the croissant, but at any rate, that's probably what you want to read. But speaking of Paris, well, there's a comment you can see in the chat, like who typed the comment. But she says, "I love hearing and reading about books, include Black girls' experiences. Raven, thank you for this piece of art!" Exclamation
Oh,
point.
thank
That's
you.
very sweet.
Thank you.
And then we have another comment when you mentioned Felicia Rashad. Somebody says Felicia and Lynn, that's the perfect visual for Nana. So with that, piggybacking on that, like who else would you envision if this became a film adaptation?
This is so hard because I don't watch a lot of I haven't watched much young people's television, and I do actually feel very strongly about like young people playing young people. So, I don't really love 30, like 29, 30-year olds playing, 17, 18-year olds. Um, but I think, and I don't remember anyone's names, but I do know, and he's probably kind of older now at this point too, but I would love for Thierry, the young man who played teenage Randall and This Is Us. I think his name is Niles Fit. It's Finch. It's something with an F. I can't remember his name. But I do think that he would be perfect for Terry. Although I also recognize that as an American boy. So I don't know any French young actors, but if I did, I would recommend them. And then for Whitney, I don't know. I've actually thought about this one a lot because I'm not sure if anyone like really hits me as super effervescent in the way that Whitney is. But I kind of think somebody like a Lovey Simone probably could do it. But that's who I would think of. And again, these are not great choices because I've already said I prefer not to have folks that are in their late 20s or in their 30s playing 17-year-olds. But that's what I can do right now.
That's funny. Because there's a lot of that going on. And I'm always surprised afterwards, like, this person is 35. I have
Yeah.
no idea. They
Yeah.
look amazing. But well, that's great. I don't see any more questions in the chat or comments. But yeah, we've had quite a few people attend. And this was, like I said, it was a really nice, fun Valentine's Day treat, a nice midday,
Yay.
talk. And so this was great. Everybody, please know that, like you said, just plug your next book. When is it coming out? Let them know again.
Okay. Love in 280 characters or less is going to be out on April 15th, so
Is
just
that the
60
cover
days from
behind
now.
you?
Yes, that is, I can't, oh Lord. Okay, yeah, it's the cover. It's a digital epistolary of a Black girl's first semester at a predominantly white institution in Virginia. So April 15th, please pre-order wherever books are sold. But if you want to support a Black-owned bookstore in Virginia, Resist Booksellers is the one that I really love.
Yes, and in addition to that bookseller in Virginia, check your local library.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
thank you so much. Happy Valentine's Day to you both and everybody out
Valentine's
there
Day.
listening. Thank you. People are saying thank you so much for this. And so it's our pleasure to bring this to you, but we couldn't do it without Ravynn. So thank you so much, Ravynn.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank everyone that's here. Thank you to everyone that's here. I really appreciate you coming and spending some time.